Hey, Rachel.
Hiya, Ellen.
Here we are having yet another discussion, a recorded discussion and exploration in our playground and sandbox of sharing and exploring ideas from the perspective of holistic inclusion.
Hmm.
Tell me what we're talking about today, Rachel.
Yeah. So today we're going to explore, play with, unpack, and really connect the dots on why the autonomic nervous system is so foundational to human health and well-being.
And so foundational in the STREAM program because it's
Mhm.
sort of our overarching organizing principle is the primacy of the ANS. What does that
Mhm.
even mean, the primacy of the ANS? Well, we do work with this model called the four domains of health, where we talk about the influence of biochemistry, biomechanics, emotions, and scars on our well being. But over that, the big umbrella over those four domains is the autonomic nervous system. In other words, every one of those subcategories, those subsystems, biochemistry, biomechanics, emotions, and scars, is governed by the autonomic nervous system, which causes downhill cascades that affect every one of those systems profoundly.
And if I may, the emotional domain and the ANS perhaps almost synonymous with one another in a way, right? Because our
Very deeply and
emotion,
intricately and intrinsically connected. Where? In the brainstem.
the brainstem, and we're going to get into that, right? So just a quick nod to like the ANS surrounds the domains, and perhaps in a way, really that emotional domain, the emotions as sort of the canary in the coal mine,
Yeah.
alerting us to the fact that our ANS is trying to talk to us.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Our
yeah,
ANS
awesome.
has a message to convey, but what we feel is all the effects of the message or the rumors. It's a game of telephone. Let's cut out the
Hmm.
middleman and be able to go inside and identify our story and our state and understand autonomically what's happening. So then we can have a direct relationship with it instead of putting band-aids on all the downstream effects of that autonomic dysregulation, which never gets to the primary I wouldn't want to say it's a cause. I would just say the primary reality of the driver of the bus.
Yeah, like
Yes,
where it all starts.
exactly. The
Yeah,
origin. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm all about origins because too often people are dealing with the effect and not the cause. So I like
Right.
to go back to the original origin, common word root, right? Yeah, I like to get back to the original cause, original causality that is inevitable. Any being that's alive, even a plant, has a version of an autonomic nervous system with sleep wake cycles. Bacteria have an autonomic nervous system with periods of activity and periods of rest.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
as we evolve or move through complexity in species, going from bacteria to multicellular organisms and multicellular organisms to then other categories of living beings up through the complexity of mammals. Mammals have an autonomic nervous system that is multifactorial, but we're still dealing with the same basic question: is there something here that's threatening my survival?
Right, right. And I love that you're giving some context here to what I, might use the language of neuroflexibility around,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and what does that really mean? So if I can reflect back what I'm hearing from you, it's that, we're designed with this really, really amazing system that is supposed to move through states. It's supposed to, sleep wake cycles, gauging threat, gauging safety, helping us to really understand our external environment so that we can give ourselves what we need accordingly, or get what we need for survival accordingly. Essentially,
Well,
is that
yeah, and even not just survival, but also a generative state of
thriving?
creativity, and in human terms, we like to call that productivity.
Hmm.
But we can't always be on, and this is the great fallacy of always being attached to upregulation and productivity, that
Right.
without allowing our systems, the very ordinary, very biological, and very real need to move through what's called an ultradian rhythm, upregulation and downregulation that is happening in between sleep-wake cycles. If we don't pay attention to that and just keep overriding it using caffeine or using social media or using some kind of biochemically stimulating biochemical stimulation to focus our attention on at a level of intensity that we've come to associate with productivity, we basically exhaust ourselves. And that's what we're dealing with so often when we're working with people in stream, is people who are exhausted at a profound level because they don't know how to respect their needs for rest and activity as an AC current, an alternating current, rather than a direct current. We think we're fire hoses. No, we're ebbing and flowing and more tidal in tidal, TADAL, tidal in our needs for expression at a healthy autonomic level.
Yeah. Dare we might say like a waveform.
Like a waveform.
Like a waveform. So our nature is to move through this waveform, yet we live in a culture, in a society that expects up and to the right, or a level of, let's say, consistency. It's asking us not only to not be a waveform, but to be, productive and generative all the time. The paradox being that that's not how our bodies are. It's not how they work.
We're not designed to work that way. Nature designed sleep rest cycles, even at a minute binary level, on off, on off, on off, is circulating all the time cellularly throughout our bodies. We vibrate in on and off. And for thinking that we're always supposed to be on as long as we're awake, we end up with so much extra tension in our bodies by trying to force something.
So let's come back to the ANS through evolution. Is it fair to say that the primary function is to gauge safety in the external environment?
Yes, that's the primary function.
Primary function. And then obviously beyond that, there are additional functions. But if that primary function is designed to help us, let's say, accurately perceived threat, that threat is then registered in our internal environment and brings on a physiologic cascade, an electrochemical cascade.
Yes, an electrochemical cascade. So what that means is that we perceive threat somehow through our five senses, either consciously or unconsciously. We're aware that's maybe even at an unconscious level. Let's say if you had a trauma associated with, a dog bite in your childhood, and you even see a dog a block away, you could be reacting to, ooh, dog unsafe, without even it consciously entering your mind. You may not even be aware you saw a dog, yet your body is going into this, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis overload of a lot of adrenaline, and suddenly you're feeling nervous and anxious. You could even go into a panic attack and without a cause. We know this as PTSD. We're reacting to things that we have associated our threat to survival, but our entire nervous system gets enrolled in this reaction to unsafe, unsafe, unsafe. So it's recruiting our organs, our glands, our muscles, our connective tissue, our blood vessels into preparing to activate to get ourselves away from the perceived threat.
And you're highlighting something really, really important. And I'd like to slow us down and just note the nuance in this piece. So we may not even be aware of the perception.
Right.
This is the piece where, our allegiance to the conscious thinking mind and to knowing can really get in our own way, right? These things are happening at a sub and unconscious level. They're happening lightning speed, and oftentimes it's happening outside of our awareness. So all the more reason to get really curious and become an observer of one's own state, because we can't always know what is a safety cue, what is a trigger in that sense. We hear the word trigger a lot, and in pop psychology and on Instagram and all this stuff.
But we always think we know when it's happening because suddenly we get angry. But we could be triggered by things we're completely unaware of, things that are outside of our memory of having perceived them.
Right, right. And this brings me back to the cascade piece as well, right? Because it's like the neuroflexibility, it's, like we may be triggered, move into, let's say, survival mode, which for the purpose of this discussion, let's say is like a state of upregulation or safety preservation. So not a true collapse, but something that's outside of like healthy generative curiosity, anything that's like a little more intense where the vigilance is now like the
Yes.
vigilance is on, right?
Yes. Yes,
So,
vigilance on, therefore defense is fully arrayed. That's a
right.
whole different state than open curiosity and exploration. It's the
Mm,
opposite. We start closing down and withdrawing, making our moving from alert curiosity through vigilance, then to fight, then to flight. And then, it could get more intense from there. That could go into fawning or freezing or ultimately collapsing. These are all states, but people are not aware. We're in many, M-I-N-I, many versions of those states all day long, moment
yeah.
to moment. We're cycling through. We see something we find mildly offensive on social media, and we're like, oh, that person and what they said, and I don't think so. Or,
Mhm.
or we have a thought that we find faintly embarrassing. And we go into this internal state of collapse and blush, and our heart rate changes, and we feel like, oh my God, I don't deserve to live. I just had that thought. This is happening internally and externally, where we can do it to ourselves. We can receive the cueing from outside our bodies in our external environment, but we are always moving through states.
Right. And you brought us right back to that neuroflexibility. And I love that you highlighted how small, how minute, and how variable this neuroflexibility is in terms of external and or internal stimuli.
Mm.
When people talk about being body first, somatically inclusive, really playing with this awareness of state, and then we'll talk about it in a moment, but its relationship with story in the self is the basis, because this is such profound stuff that we can understand cognitively, but just how it moves in our own bodies is the basis for really understanding it.
That
So
is our reality, that
it's
movement of
reality.
energy through our bodies, emotions, energy and motion throughout our nervous system, whether
Mhm.
it's generated self with self as a reaction to a thought we had, or something that we see or smell or hear or taste,
Mhm.
or feel, with our skin and our fingers, or our sensory apparatus, our proprioception from outside our bodies. It's all, you could call them all triggers, but you can have generative triggers. Not all triggers are bad. You
Right.
know, a trigger could be, oh, I'm feeling hungry right now. What am I going to do about that? Or,
Mm.
oh, I need to take a drink of water right now. What am I going to do about that?
Well, you're nodding to a detour that I promise I won't take, but it's definitely something I'm really curious about exploring and sharing with other people, which is the relationship between safety and judgment, what we deem to be good and bad.
Oh,
So
yes, that's a
I
big
won't
detour,
take
but that's for another day.
I won't take that off ramp now, but we're talking about neuroception, essentially, interoception, proprioception,
Yeah, but let's
awareness.
stop and let's define those words. So interoception
I'm hungry.
is, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need to change the cross of my legs because my legs are uncomfortable in this position. I'm starting to get some pain in my sacrum if I continue to sit this way. That's an interoceptive impulse, is I need to change position. But interoceptive and proprioceptive have an intersection there. Proprioceptive is, how do I know that that tendon or those nerves are starting to get activated? Proprioception is feedback that come from many kinds of specialized receptors that are intrinsic or embedded in our connective tissue matrix, that are there to send that information to our nervous system so we can then respond and react to changing the position. You've been sitting on your foot, and if you keep going, it's going to be completely numb. How good would you be at making an escape with a completely numb foot? So you've got to keep the blood flowing to that place in your body, right? So the point is, proprioception is more physically based cues. Interoception is more neurologically or autonomically based cues, especially things like hunger or thirst or, you know, a sense that you're about to have a diarrhea attack. All of those fall under the category of interoception. But let's talk about neuroception, because that is a little bit more elusive. And I love your definition for neuroception, because I know you think about this a lot.
All the time. It feels like the basis. So if like proprioception is the body in the external world and interoception is the felt sense of the body from the inside out, I think neuroception sits beneath both of them, which is really, how safe am I in this moment?
So that is the autonomic nervous system. We could say the autonomic nervous system and neuroception are almost synonymous.
Yeah. Inextricably linked. Back to that piece about the primary function of the autonomic nervous system is to assess the state of our safety.
Yes.
Safety is another one of those words that you see bandied about quite a bit.
Oh my goodness, in the days of being woke, how safe is safe? Gosh.
What, you know, and so in your the first module of your program, you talk about the brain as a ramshackle house and the brainstem as the seat of neuroception, or the brainstem is where all of our anatomical and physiological action around safety pretty much converge and occur. So cued by the vagus nerve,
right?
All those sites in the brainstem really are communicating all the time, are the autonomic nervous system saying, I'm safe, I'm unsafe, I'm safe, I'm unsafe.
Yes, but it's a circuit. It's not just the vagus nerve and the brainstem talking to itself. It involves every receptor of vagal input, including organs and glands and blood vessels and lung tissue, and you know, how open or closed are my bronchi at any given point, what's my blood pressure at any given point. It's all about smooth muscle being the autonomically cued specialized muscle tissue that responds to survival needs around, let's say, digestion. You know, you have to squeeze in a certain order to move food from mouth to anus so it doesn't come back up again, right? Things are moving in the wrong order when you're vomiting. They're moving in the right order when, you know, you're eating something that comes out the other end. But these physiologic functions are all provisional, based on sense of safety. And when we don't feel safe, it shuts them down in favor of more efficient connection to survival-based behaviors and even muscle groups.
Right. So this takes us right back to, you know, neuroception sitting beneath, let's say, interoception is what you're talking about. And there's our awareness of, I feel hungry, or I understand I have a felt sense of my belly gurgling. That vagus nerve and the ANS really having a much, much more refined and like incredible communication all the time with that.
Refined and inclusive. Let's use that word again. Holistically inclusive. The vagus nerve wandering where? To all of these different organs and glands, and provider information sources for procedures in the body and reactions and responsiveness in the body. Responsiveness to what? Our external environment, and how about the internal environment we create for ourselves?
Yep, interoception, proprioception. So what's so interesting about this is when we speak about safety, there's our conscious beliefs about what is safe or unsafe, our thoughts, but really our body is what is deciding what is safe or unsafe. And that's not always inside of our conscious awareness. To your point, this intricate system made up of systems has these cascades going. So if we can point our awareness in an interoceptive way, we can get really curious and learn more about the state of what our body believes is safe or unsafe. Our mind may say, oh, that social media post didn't bother me, or my friend saying that comment to me wasn't a problem, when in reality, our body is having a physiological reaction to the stimulus.
Yes, but it's not included in our awareness because we've already dissociated from it.
Exactly, because we've prioritized the story and we
Mhm.
haven't brought the body along. So again,
Mhm.
herein lies this piece about there's a lot of conversation about body first approach and somatic this and somatic that. If we are not going in and tending to our own interoception with a level of curiosity and non-judgment, a lot of that may be
It may
storyline.
be overridden, right? That's what we're
Yeah.
going to do because we have this illusion that we're supposed to be fine and productive little units of social behavior and productivity within our larger culture,
Mhm.
all wanting what we want and letting our desire for, let's say, a certain level of material safety or material security override the body's needs, the basic body needs for rest, for food, for space to digest. How many people just eat a meal and keep going, or eat at their desk, or eat while they're standing and walking? There is no opportunity for the necessary autonomic accommodation for digestion in that scenario. And we're sitting too long and we don't walk enough, and how do we breathe when we're walking? It goes on and on, these infinitesimal physical details of the way we constantly chronically override the signaling from our autonomics. That's why it's so central to our teaching and stream.
Right. And to take the step to get really curious about, without coming to conclusions, what your body may be trying to tell you.
Yes. How
So,
do you read the cues and respond appropriately?
yes.
Mm.
So, as someone like so many people who has lived in override for quite a long time, um, slowing down enough and divesting my awareness from the external world and putting it into my interoceptive awareness.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel unsafe a lot more than I'd like to admit.
Mm-hmm.
My ego would like to admit, than my mind would like to admit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I'm moving too fast, I can't notice that.
Yes. A
Me
very
feeling
persuasive form of avoidance.
very persuasive form of avoidance. We're also not designed to live the way we're living. And so we won't go here today, but the relationship between safety and belonging and that ramshackle house and our innate physiological imperative for belonging being connected to safety means that we're trying to fit ourselves in to living a way we're not supposed to live,
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
my view.
Yeah, we're maladapting
Yes.
to an absurd demand sequence for our neurological health.
Yes. So having the courage and the openness to slow down and to get curious about when your body is feeling unsafe, there's no judgment. It's
Mm.
simply an exercise and a practice that you can weave into your life that will teach you and show you an incredible amount about yourself, about your beliefs, about the state of your health. And coming back to the primacy of the ANS, if we're talking about, spending time in a narrow zone of nervous system function lends itself to pro-inflammatory states, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if we
Mm-hmm.
want to truly take back our autonomy around our health and our well-being, physical, emotional, mental, this is absolutely an imperative. And it comes back to that ANS and the
This
way
is
we
where we
engage.
start.
This is where we
This is the
start.
beginning. We start with looking at the primacy of the ANS, and we're back at the beginning of our discussion. Why the primacy of the ANS? Because we want, or at least I want, embodied autonomy. I want to be connected to being the healthiest I can be. But if I'm constantly overriding ANS cues, then I'm denying my body the moments, the tiny little moments of decision making that could be pro health instead of pro inflammatory.
Right. And the non-judgment piece is so critical. It's so easy to be swept up into the milieu of upregulation.
Mm-hmm.
So to develop a practice that helps you get into relationship with your autonomic nervous system, awareness of it first, What might it be trying to tell me? Not jumping to conclusions, not jumping to stories, but to an awareness of its state
Yep.
as such a foundational practice. I really believe this can change the world. And I don't mean to sound cliche when I say that, but I really believe in this, like because I've worked with it myself, the relationship between story and states, like let the stories go.
Mhm.
Where am I now?
Yes, where am I now without a judgment attached, and just see, just the open gate of curiosity to answer that question, where am I now? Profound.
So profound. Awesome, Ellen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was quite the dialogue. Looking forward to more.